Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you to all of our riders and residents here who have gathered on, let's say, just a little bit of a toasty day to come out on this very, very important issue that needs to be resolved, and it needs to be resolved now. Frankly, it should have been resolved 6 weeks ago, but we got to get it done now. We are all here today because we understand just how important SEPTA and the other mass transit agencies across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania are to our regional economy and ultimately to the entire state. So what do we want, and what do we want the state Senate Republicans to hear? We want SEPTA funding. When do we want it?
Now.
What do we want?
Now.
When do we want it? All right, so this group is not quite as good with the chants as they are in Philadelphia, but I'm telling you, by the end of this press conference, we'll have it down. So I am Steve Sanaciro, and it's my privilege and honor to represent the 10th State Senate District in our state Senate. And the district includes Yardley Borough, it includes Doylestown, where we have another train station, it includes Croydon, where my friend Tina Davis lives, and where we have another train station, and of course the Levittown station, which is a beautiful station recently redone, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment, because it's relevant to why we're here today. And we're here today because SEPTA and the other transit agencies across Pennsylvania have told us as legislators that they cannot make ends meet, that they are looking at a significant shortfall in their budgets. In the case of SEPTA, over $200 million a year. And if that money is not made up, and made up soon, it means that dramatic cuts are going to have to be made. Now, we're doing this press conference today on the 14th of August for two reasons. One, because the Senate just took action a couple of days ago, which I'll talk about in a moment, but also because this is the day that SEPTA has said that if they don't get the additional funding by this time, then cuts are going to have to be made starting on the 24th. And in a few moments, we'll be hearing from my friend Bob Harvey, County Commissioner and member of the SEPTA Board, and he's going to talk a little bit more about that. So today is an important day. It's an important day for SEPTA. It's an important day across the Commonwealth. And it's just 2 days removed from when we were called back into session in the state Senate. And we were called back into session to consider, among other things, the Senate Republican transit funding bill. Now, listen, on the one hand, I'm glad that the Senate Republicans have finally acknowledged that this is an issue and that they thought that they had to, in fact, move a bill. But unfortunately, the bill that they moved is not a solution. It's not real funding. It's not real additional funding for SEPTA. And why is that? Because it takes the majority of the money that it would put toward mass transit from our public transportation trust fund, and it does so by taking money away that's already obligated for capital expenditures for mass transit. So in other words, when SEPTA wants to go and buy a new bus or repair an existing bus, buy a new train, repair a train, put down rails, repair rails, all the infrastructure, whether it's these stations like the one here in Yardley behind us or elsewhere in the region, they rely on that money. So taking that money away to give toward operating costs is not really a solution, because on the back end, SEPTA is still going to be short, and it's still going to face this budget crunch. And indeed, SEPTA has acknowledged that and has said that this is really not a solution for them. All right, so that is what our friends on the other side of the aisle, after 6 weeks of saying really hardly anything about this issue, have come up with. It is not a solution. It's not a solution. And by the way, it does one other thing that is, I think, for the riders and the constituents here in Bucks County and elsewhere in the SEPTA region, really a problem. It requires the mass transit agencies, including SEPTA, to raise fares every 2 years forever. All right? Yeah, right, boo. Right. I mean, listen, that's an issue. The fare raising issue is an issue that every one of these transit agencies has to grapple with. But at a time when people are still struggling, when working families are still struggling to put food on the table, clothes on kids' backs, saying that now you are going to guaranteed have to pay more for your commute is not what we as a state should be doing. Especially when we are shirking our responsibility to fund mass transit, to be responsible, to come together and do the right thing for the people, not just of the Philadelphia region, but the entire state. Now, I said a moment ago I'd come back to the issue of the Levittown train station. And I point that out because it's significant. As you may know, the Levittown train station was completely redone a number of years ago. It's a beautiful station. This station here in Yardley was redone and made much better than it was before. How did that happen? Well, that happened with money that was raised through Act 89, a bill that we passed in the state legislature back in 2013. At the time, I was a member of the State House. I have the seat that Perry Warren, my friend and colleague in the House, represents today. That was a bipartisan bill. In fact, it was a bill that was proposed by a Republican governor, Tom Corbett. And what did Act 89 do? Act 89 pumped an additional $500 million a year into mass transit, in addition to another $200 million a year into our roads and bridges across the Commonwealth. So when you see paving going on, or you see these upgrades to these stations, that's Act 89. Now, that was a bipartisan bill. It was just 12 years ago. It was a Republican proposal that Democrats and Republicans got behind. But suddenly, our friends on the other side of the aisle have had this collective case of amnesia. They've forgotten that they have a responsibility as legislators, as stewards of our state, to come up with a responsible revenue stream, a recurring revenue stream, to fund this critical work. And instead, they've come up with a hollow gimmick that's really little more than a shell game and doesn't do what it needs to do, which is what SEPTA has said. So we're here today on the 14th of August, over 6 weeks since a budget should have been passed and since funding for mass transit should have been accomplished, to say that it is time. It is past time. We need our Republican legislators, our Republican members of the state Senate in particular, those here in the southeastern part of the state, to step up and demand from their leadership better. Not this cynical attempt to just make it look like they're doing something when they're not. We need the public to be part of this, and that's why having this press conference and rally today is so critically important. So yes, get on board. We all need to get on board to make this happen. Get on board. Get on board. Get on board. Get on board. See, I told you we were going to get better at the chants, so stick with me. So now it's my honor to introduce my friend, someone I've known for 22 years now, who is a great public servant to the people of Bucks County, who knows well in his role as a county commissioner how important SEPTA is to our region, but who knows even more critically and more acutely as a member of the SEPTA board the challenges that SEPTA is facing. Ladies and gentlemen, Bob Harvey. Bob.
I want to thank Senator Sarah for his leadership on this issue, and Representative Warren, who's going to be speaking next, Representative Prokopiak, Representative Davis, Representative Monroe, all who are all here, and all the people who are here and all the members of the media. I joined the SEPTA board about a year and a half ago, and I knew from that time, it was well known, it was no secret, that SEPTA was approaching a fiscal cliff. And in the time I've been on the board, through the leadership of the chair of the board, Ken Lawrence especially, SEPTA has launched an austerity program that has saved over $30 million in 1 year. They've reinstituted parking fees, which we suspended during COVID because we cared about the people coming to ride these trains. We wanted to make things as easy as we could on them. We've got trolley modernizations teed up. We have bus revolution teed up. We have improvements that have been years in the making that would make it easier for people and make SEPTA better. All of that is on hold. SEPTA is doing its part and will continue to do its part. Crime is down to record low levels. We're focusing on fare evasion. We're doing all the things already that you're hearing from some of the politicians in Harrisburg they want to see SEPTA work on. Those steps are being taken. The steps being taken in Harrisburg seem to me very similar to the steps we see being taken in Washington, D.C. by leadership there. There's no other way to put it than an assault on working families. An assault on people who rely on public transportation. They rely on these trains and these buses and these trolleys to get to work every day. We're about a week or so away from young men and women from this county and the other counties and the city relying on this system to get to college and back. We have senior citizens. We have people who are going to not only to work but to doctor's appointments. We have people who want to go into the city and visit the museums and go to the restaurants. The tourism that drives this area, the business that drives this area, this region is responsible for well over 40% of the economic, driving force of this Commonwealth. So when you see cuts being made to things like SNAP and Medicaid, and then you see Congress taking a break, when you see a state Senate leadership that's only called the Senate into session 30 days since February, less than that. Try that for once. Try not going to work, over the course of several months except for 30 days. Oh, by the way, you still get your paycheck. See if that happens. Okay? This SEPTA officer back here, he's showing up for work every day. The people that run the trains are going to come by pretty soon. They're showing up for work every day. People that run our buses, the mechanics, the cleaning staff that run the people that run our trolleys, they show up for work every day. The 10,000 people who work for SEPTA show up for work every day. It's time for people in the state Senate to show up for work and do their jobs. So the cuts that are going into effect, are not what SEPTA wants to do. We want to launch the bus revolution. We want to modernize our trolleys. We want to do the work on our stations to make sure that they're accessible to everybody. We want to launch the signage improvements that we have planned. We want to do all the things that have been worked on now by a board that cares and a staff that cares about the people they serve. It's time for the people who have been elected to serve to actually act like they care. Because so far, except for the people standing behind me and other leadership in the State House and obviously Governor Shapiro, aside from them, we don't see a lot of leadership anywhere. So we need to have that. This is not something that's negotiable. These cuts are going to go into effect. This is not a bluff, which I hear from some of the people in Harrisburg. So, well, we think this is just a bluff. You're not really going to do these cuts. Well, we don't have a choice. What choice do we have? So the simple message is, serve the people you're supposed to serve this Commonwealth, get back to work and do your jobs. So, somebody who I know works very hard every day for the people of this district, this specific district we're in right now, is State Representative Perry Warren.
Thank you, Commissioner. So, I'm State Representative Perry Warren. I represent the communities of Yardley, Lower Makefield, Newtown Borough, Newtown Township, and Upper Makefield Township. And 7 years ago, we were here at this site, the Yardley train station, to celebrate the joyous occasion of the ribbon cutting on the new and improved and modernized Yardley station. Done here because our residents use SEPTA. I met a couple from across the street, Yardley Commons, who tell me they don't go into Philadelphia, they go from here to Langhorne to have dinner at the Irish Rover and get home safely to Yardley. When my office, my district office, was here on Main Street, I had two employees who came up from Philadelphia to Yardley to work here, to expand our economy here. So we need SEPTA in our communities. We need to fund SEPTA. We need a functioning transit authority here in the Southeast as well as throughout the state. So last week, we got all the members of the House, Representative Davis, Representative Monroe, Representative Prokopiak, and I got an email saying we're going into session on Sunday, on this past Sunday and Monday, because it's time to pass a funding transportation bill for transit throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So the House met. The bill had been teed up. SEPTA said they needed an answer by August 14th in order to not implement the proposed cuts in service that will take effect on August 24th. So the House went, we voted. We voted on House Bill 1788. The bill passed with 101 Democratic votes and 7 Republican votes. The bill was a compromise bill. It included proposals that had been made by Republican members of the General Assembly, the Senate and the House, to try to forge a bill that would satisfy everyone, and the bill passed. So what did the bill do? The bill created a sustainable revenue source for transit in Pennsylvania by reaching to the sales and use tax. In Yardley, we pay 6% on taxable transactions, and increasing the percentage of that overall tax, and I'm not talking a percentage of 6% here, I'm talking a percentage of 100% of the collected sales and use tax, from 4.4% to 6.15%, an increase of 1.75%, and allocating those funds toward transit. That would raise an estimated $167 million for SEPTA, $40 million plus for the Pittsburgh Regional Transit Authority, and roughly $60–70 million for transit throughout the state, not just Philadelphia, not just the Southeast, not just Pittsburgh, but to create a sustainable source of revenue to provide for transit operations throughout the state. And moreover, as part of that bill, there's a provision for bonding and notes that would raise up to $325 million for roads and bridges to improve transportation, not just transit, but all transportation throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And those of us who live here and cross through the state and live here in the Southeast know that we need it. We need transit here in Pennsylvania. We need to get to our jobs in Philadelphia. We need to alleviate the traffic on our roads leading into Philadelphia and throughout the Southeast. We've got some big events coming up in the next year. 2026, the semi-quincentennial events. We're going to have to play a World Series in Philadelphia this October. We've got a season coming up for the world champion Philadelphia Eagles.
I'll cheer for that.
Southeastern Pennsylvania, Philadelphia are the economic center, not the geographic center, but the economic center of Philadelphia, of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, along with Pittsburgh. We need transit. We need it now. We can't let these cuts go into effect on August 24th. We need to support SEPTA now and going forward. Let's go back to Harrisburg, senators, and let's pass House Bill 1788. Thank you. And not everyone today here is an elected government official. We have advocates who are speaking on behalf of trains and transit, and I'm proud to introduce Bob Pravetti.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. My name is Bob Pravetti, and thank you, Senator Savara, for having this event and bringing people together. We have to save SEPTA. This is not tolerable. This is insane. People need to get to work. They need to get to school. Our economies need to thrive. Look, folks, we're not Dallas, Houston, Atlanta with big, wide highways. We've got the Schuylkill Expressway and I-95. How much more traffic is it going to take? I mean, then they're going to talk about widening those roadways. With what money? We need to invest, take a conservative Republican idea and make the highest and best use of existing infrastructure. We have an exhaustive system here that we're not investing in. I agree with Senator Pittman. Yeah, the place needs to change. And it was mentioned earlier. SEPTA has those plans to reimagine regional rail and to the trolley modernization. We need investment dollars. If we're going to design a new car, we need to hire a designer. Build a factory, get workers. That's investment dollars. We're letting this place go. And we need to keep our voices high, not only for today, but the future. The capital budget needs to be increased. Act 89 needs to be revisited, and we need to spend more money on our public transit system to move people. I represent 8,000 people in Northwest Philadelphia that are worried about losing the Chestnut Hill West Line. The Chestnut Hill West Line is the heart of what made those communities in Germantown, Mount Airy, and Chestnut Hill grow. and thrive. People move there because they have that option to get into the city. I know seniors that live there specifically because they're worried as they get older, they don't want to drive, they want to have that option. And now it's going to go away. Folks, we need to make noise, we need to keep the pressure up, we got to keep calling everybody in Harrisburg saying this can't stand. So save SEPTA, save SEPTA, save SEPTA, save SEPTA, save SEPTA, save SEPTA, save SEPTA.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate that, and thank you for all you're doing to continue to advocate. Next, I'd like to introduce my friend and longtime colleague in the General Assembly, State Representative Tina Davis. Tina?
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm State Rep Tina Davis. I represent parts of Levittown, Bristol Township, and Bristol Borough. I was fortunate to be on council many years ago. I'm not going to mention when the Croydon train station came. And I was the president of council back then, and SEPTA was going to put money either into Croydon train station or Levittown. So, of course, I jumped on that opportunity back then, and we voted for it, and we were able to get it. Sorry, Jim. We got that very quickly. But what it did to the community was bring young people to that area because they could get to Philadelphia. They bought homes there. We started a TRID, which is a way to bring people to the district because they took the TRID. We also got rid of a lot of the crime that was around there. So I just want to say, 2 years ago, the Senate promised to fund SEPTA. They lied. I've been in Harrisburg. I'm part of the leadership team. I've been there since January. Every single week, we tried to sit down with the people in charge on the other side and the governor, and they did not sit down with us regarding transportation. It's now a moral issue because people around the Commonwealth, if they cannot get to work, hey, listen, I just got a $700 PICO bill. What am I going to do? I'm going to cut. We get it. I got a cable bill really high. We get all that. But now we're cutting people who aren't making very much money. They can't get to work and they can't get to school. So we need your help. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. And next, the newest member of our delegation here in Bucks County, Representative Jim Prokopiak. Jim?
Thank you all for coming out today. When we look at mass transit in this state, it is a priority, just as much a priority as education is, which is also held up by this budget. Just as much it is for our human services, which also is held up by this budget, or lack of a budget. We look at how our community is interconnected. It was talked about the Levittown station, which was done about 4 years ago. Tens of millions of dollars was spent on that project. And under this plan, that station would shut down. It won't run anymore. That money would be lost because we don't have a sustainable funding model for SEPTA and for all the other mass transit places here. You go there today, that parking lot, like this parking lot, would be packed with commuters. And they don't just go into the city. They also come out here. Talk to a home health care worker. Talk to their agencies that employ those people, that bring people from the city to take care of our seniors. Without SEPTA, without other mass transit, those jobs aren't filled. People aren't being taken care of. That's a problem. The bill we passed on Monday and previously as well helps solve mass transit's problem both today and in the future. It's not a band-aid, it's a solution. And it requires accountability. Let's make a mistake. The SEPTA of the past is not the SEPTA of today. They're doing the things that need to be done. They're doing the things that make SEPTA safer, make SEPTA more user-friendly. Those are the types of things we need to continue to happen. Accountability is an important part of what we passed in Harrisburg. And it's an important part of things that is talked about in the Senate as well. But those things are happening, and they need to continue to happen. But we can't have accountability without funding. We need the funding to make sure that people can get to work, they can get to school, they can get here from the city to take care of our seniors. The time has passed for us to pass a budget that takes care of education, that takes care of mass transit, that takes care of funding for mental health, that takes care of all the priorities that not just the Southeast but Pennsylvania needs. That's all I have to say. I'll turn it back over to the center.
Thank you, Jim. You're absolutely right. We're not here today to talk about the entire budget, but Jim's absolutely right. These are all important things, too, and that has to get done. So I would like to now introduce one of our local residents here in Lower Makefield, actually in Lower Makefield Township. We're in Yardley right now, who uses this service, uses SEPTA. Just like my wife used to when she used to commute down to Philadelphia. She used to be known as the mayor of the R3 because everyone knew her. But it's important that you get to understand for people who actually use the service what an impact it has on their lives. So, Bill, would you come on up and talk to folks? Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, so thank you, Steve and Perry and your colleagues for supporting SEPTA funding and for organizing today's event in support of SEPTA funding. So I'm Bill Ashmanskas. My wife Allison and I live just a few blocks away, about a 10 minutes walk. Actually, when we first moved to Yardley, we lived like just across the street from the train station. That's true. I mean, it's okay. Oh, he used to bike.
Just get a little closer to you.
Oh, sorry. So I typically ride SEPTA Regional Rail to commute to work in Philadelphia 5 days a week. Allison and I chose to live in Bucks County so that we could split our commutes. Since her job is in Princeton, my job is in Philadelphia, so the availability of SEPTA Regional Rail was really a top factor in our moving to Yardley. Our part of Bucks County is an outstanding place to live with close-knit neighborhoods, rustic natural beauty, suburban appeal, excellent schools. We're fortunate to be within commuting range of good jobs in central New Jersey by car, in New York City by train, and of course in Philadelphia by SEPTA Regional Rail. So we and our neighbors have good jobs and we work hard at them, bringing economic activity to Bucks County. SEPTA Regional Rail is what makes it feasible for Allison and me to live in Bucks County rather than in the city. If regional rail service were terminated or severely curtailed, my options would be to move to Philadelphia, to scale back my hours, or to add my own car to the daily rush hour gridlock on I-95. The existence of SEPTA Regional Rail keeps my car and many of my neighbors' cars off of I-95, which reduces highway congestion for the many other people whose work locations or schedules are not compatible with the train commute. So even highway commuters, in my opinion, benefit via reduced traffic from support for SEPTA. And the wider community benefits from the economic impact of my and my neighbors bringing income from Philadelphia employers back home to Bucks County. Let me also just take a moment to commend SEPTA on the cleanliness, safety, and efficient operation. I've observed in my 16 years riding SEPTA Regional Rail from Bucks County to Philadelphia, I have never once felt unsafe on board a SEPTA train or at a regional rail station. Regional rail commuters are the kind of people who leave their trash in a rubbish bin, not on the floor. And regional rail passengers swipe in and swipe out at the two ends of their trip, and conductors pass through each car multiple times to rescan passes to ensure payment. I think only a few times in 16 years have I seen SEPTA Regional Rail riders evade the fare. So continuing a railroad legacy originally brought to Bucks County in 1876 by the Philadelphia and Reading Railroad. I mean, I often say about this town that the Vault, the brewery, microbrewery down the street, is the second best thing ever to happen to Yardley. The first best thing was the Reading Railroad. So continuing this tradition, the SEPTA Regional Rail System does an admirable job to make efficient use of available resources, and SEPTA provides a vital service to the residents of Bucks County. It makes it feasible for my neighbors and me to live in this lovely suburb while earning a living in Philadelphia. So I hope that our legislative delegation in Harrisburg is able to recognize and support the vital economic benefit of this key part of our region's transportation infrastructure. So thanks again.
Thank you, Bill. And just on cue, we have one of the Conrail freight trains. That's not SEPTA. So we have, to round out our delegation here in Bucks County, I'd like to call up my friend from the Warminster area, where there is also one of the larger SEPTA stations in the SEPTA region, my friend Brian Monroe. Brian?
How long does this go? It's a long one. Well, hopefully we'll make just as much noise today. Let's be clear, everybody. The Senate Republicans are playing with fire, okay? They're playing with fire not just with SEPTA, but our local economies. So I represent portions of, I represent Warminster, Warrington, portions of New Britain, and Ivyland Borough, and I have spoken to thousands of individuals in my district. Shall I wait?
Yeah, we're going to wait just a minute until it's passed on.
Good, I'll start over. So who owns that? Is it SEPTA?
Conrail is a track, SEPTA.
Okay, I'm going to start over. So let's be clear. Senate Republicans are playing with fire. They're playing with fire not just with SEPTA, but with our local economies. So I represent Warminster, Warrington, Ivyland, New Britain, and since I've been in office for 3 years, I've spoken to, like I said, hundreds, if not thousands of them. And these are people that are teachers. They drive the buses. They work in early childhood education. They work in a lot of the small businesses peppered throughout the district. They work in senior homes and nursing homes. And the number one thing that they tell me is that they need more SEPTA service, not less SEPTA service. Yeah. So the question is, okay, so what are we going to move? What are we going to do moving forward? Are we going to harm our local economies? You know what? Like I said, I've been in elected office for some time. I've seen a lot of speeches like this that have been given before, and I never remember people standing up at a podium and talking about how they're going to hurt their constituents and how they're going to hurt their local economy. It's always positive, right? It's always about how what you're going to do to help your local economy. The Senate Republicans are literally running on hurting our local economies and our local constituents.
On my dime.
Yeah, on your dime. So, look, I think one of the biggest factors that we're also not talking about enough is the local roadways. If you drive down through Warminster, you're going to drive down through Street Road, you're going to drive down through York Road, County Line Road, 611, and so on and so forth. And I guess if there's, we mentioned all of the negatives, all the horrible things that are going to happen if SEPTA does not get funded. I did think about one positive thing that might come out of SEPTA not getting funded, and that is all the extra time that Senate Republicans are going to have sitting in their cars while in traffic contemplating their poor choices. So let's not let that happen. Let's get this funding done, and let's get it done today. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Before we take questions, I just want to note, what Perry described earlier is the recurring revenue piece of this. And when we passed Act 89 back in 2013, it involved a tax increase, our gas tax increase. It was not an easy vote, I have to tell you. It was not easy. And every time I've run for office since then, I've been attacked for it. But the truth of the matter is that money was critically needed for our roads and bridges and for our mass transit. And we're at a point now where we have to once again invest in both. And by the way, the Republican proposal in the state Senate did all those bad things I talked about before. It also takes a fair amount of that capital transit money in the fund and puts it into rural roads and bridges. Now listen, I'm all for dealing with roads and bridges no matter where they are, in the rural parts of the state, the southeast, wherever it may be. But when we were debating the bill on Tuesday evening, many of the Republican leaders got up and they kind of gloated about the fact that, yeah, we're taking money out of the southeast and put it into rural areas of the state. Now you know, we're getting back at you for everything Rendell did, which, as far as I can remember, Ed Rendell represented the entire Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. That's the mindset we're dealing with, and we have to overcome that. And it's time for them to be responsible and come to the table. We Democrats in the state Senate have been calling on them to do that for a long time. The House Democrats have been calling on them to do that. Governor Shapiro has led on this issue by making the proposal in the first place to deal with this problem. Of course, he had to flex that federal money last year in order to make ends meet for SEPTA. He had Joe Biden's support in doing that. I'm not sure there would be the support from the White House this time around. All the more reason, we'll say that for another day, all the more reason why it's important that we get back to work and get this done. It's got to get it done. And it should be bipartisan. That's exactly right. And by the way, if the House bill in its original form were to be run on the floor of the Senate today, I have no doubt that there would be 26 votes for it to pass. Now, maybe not the majority of the Republican caucus, but all 23 Democrats for sure. And I think enough Republicans to make it pass. So the time has come for the Republican leadership to get a deal done, to negotiate in good faith. And let me just, one more thing about negotiating in good faith. When you spend 6 months without coming up with a meaningful proposal, and then come up with something that's really a sham, and when you spend 6 months without really coming up with a proposal on the budget, and come back and pass a budget that is actually just this year's budget, which is not negotiating or moving at all, that's not being serious. And again, it's the 14th of August. This is impacting SEPTA today. As Jim Prokopiak noted, in a couple of months, the budget impasse is going to start to impact our schools. And all the other services, the critical services that Bob Harvey knows well as a county commissioner, that the state funds and that go through our counties and our school system and our municipalities. We've got to get this done. So with that, I'm happy to open up the floor to any questions. Yes?
A way forward, figuring out a way forward
Right.
in Harrisburg. Both sides, both chambers have put out a proposal of how to find grant money, and they've been rejected. What are the other ideas for funding? What is the next thing that you can try?
Look, I think what we need is a recurring revenue stream, right? Well, let me just say, if you don't have a recurring revenue stream, then you get into this this process of coming up with solutions that are not really solutions. And in the case of what the Republicans have proposed, a 2-year Band-Aid that doesn't even do what it needs to do. So, I think what the House has proposed and what the governor supports is that transfer of the tax to the transit fund. That makes sense. That can work. That can pump the money. Maybe not exactly the amount of money that SEPTA needs at the moment, but pretty darn close. We're open to discuss revenue streams, but we hear crickets from the other side.
Do you have any other ideas of what that
I think they need to respond with a real counterproposal. They have, no, they don't have one. They don't have one. What they have proposed is not a recurring revenue stream. You have to understand, what they've proposed is taking money out of the Transit Trust Fund that is already obligated to projects, taking it away from those projects effectively and putting that into operating expenses for SEPTA and the other transit agencies. That's not a proposal. That's taking money out of one pocket of SEPTA and putting it in the other and saying it's an increase when it's not. So that's not I don't think it's incumbent upon the Democrats to continue to come up with ideas so that the Republicans can just continue to say no, 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 and they're going to come up with something that's not real. It is time for them to come up with a proposal on recurring revenue stream. If they don't like what was originally in House Bill 1788, then let's hear a proposal from them. I think it's incumbent upon them. That's a question you should be asking them. Well, I don't think that that the fact that they don't like that proposal absolves them of the responsibility to come up with something real, and they have not done that. We're not going to. We know where they are. They're not coming up with a real proposal. All right, it's on them to do that. Yes.
How quickly can you realistically get something done? It seems like your world's apart at this point. Today's SEPTA's deadline.
Right.
It's going in 10 days. Realistically, how quickly could you get a deal?
Well, listen, I know that conversations have continued as recently as today. As I said at the outset, the fact that they've at least acknowledged that there's a problem is, I think, an important step. They have not come up with a solution to that problem, but they've acknowledged it's a problem. Up until this week, they had not done that. So I will be the eternal optimist that there is still a possibility to reach compromise. But, you know, they have to come to the table, and if they're not going to agree with what the House has come up with in the way of recurring revenue, then they need to come up with a plan that produces recurring revenue so that we're not in this situation again a year from now or 2 years from now or 3 years from now. And by the way, it's not enough, as I said before, to turn to SEPTA and say, well, you got to raise your fares. We're not going to do our job, but you guys have to do that and put it on the backs of all the riders. That's not a solution either. Yeah.
So some senators, including I think Frank Berry, another Bucks County senator, has been proposing, I think for over a year, putting a tax on skilled games. Is that something you would support to create new revenue?
I would support putting a tax on skill games. Here's the problem. The Republicans have 27 members in the state Senate. And they have been absolutely incapable of getting a bill passed on that issue. So you can ask Frank about why that is. You have the majority in the state Senate, and you're incapable of getting 26 votes for a proposal to deal with that issue. The discussion on skill games has been around now for 5 or 6 years, I should say. So I think there's broad recognition that we need to deal with that. But why aren't they dealing with it? They control the calendar. They could bring a bill. They have a bill. They could bring that bill up tomorrow. And they have not done that. So you have to ask them why that is. And should you ask Frank that, what is his leadership doing about that?
And one more question on the question of the allocations.
Yeah.
Because I know that the bill that the House passed, obviously we're expecting sales tax revenue to increase, but it also shifts a higher percentage of the sales tax into transit. Where is that coming from? Like, what is that being pulled out of?
Well, listen, that revenue is coming out of that stream. Ultimately, this is why we have to pass a budget as well, right? Because we have to think in a kind of a global sense. We have to decide what's the projected revenue that's coming in and what are we spending on. All right, so it's hard to have those conversations in isolation. I would submit to you though that when you propose a budget that is a flat funding budget, essentially last year's budget, and say, this is what we're going to do because we can't go beyond $47.9 billion because somehow that's a sacrosanct number. That, again, that's not responsible governing. That's, a member who apparently took a flamethrower and, shot it at a mock-up of Governor Shapiro's budget and thought that was somehow entertaining, and did so, by the way, released that not long after the governor's residence was attacked, which I thought was really in poor taste. But leaving that aside, we need people on the other side of the aisle who are going to be responsible, just like those Republicans were 12 years ago when we did the Act 89. There's no reason this can't happen.
So not clear yet on where it's coming from.
We have to, look, it has to be considered in the course of the entire budget and getting that budget done. Yes. Yeah.
What's their plan if SEPTA isn't funded, and I guess their plan is to steal
Right.
Basically, it just sort of feels like, but
Well-
I guess what's their plan when people can't get to work, people can't get to school, people can't pay their taxes,
Right.
go to Pennsylvania State, and then they're looking at the budget shortfall, or do they just not care?
I'm not going to answer for them. All right? I'm not going to answer for them. They have to ultimately face the judgment of the people of Pennsylvania. And ultimately face the judgment of history when it comes to what we do and what we don't do by way of funding things and making choices in our budget. That's for them to respond to. I know what we stand for. Yes. Okay.
He was proposing taking like 300 million of the, I think it's the 2-point-some billion capital money that's put aside. My question to you, are you creating the pressure cooker by not even considering taking a little some of that money to at least keep SEPTA going for a few months until you can come up with the funding?
We're not.
You need the pressure cooker now or nothing else.
Well, listen, I think we have to be responsible, right? And so if we were to pass a bill as the Republicans proposed that takes money out of those critical infrastructure projects and is not recurring revenue, that's not being responsible. So whether that ultimately results in putting more pressure on them to come to the table, okay, we'll see. That would be helpful.
Well, the pressure is now if there's no deal.
Well, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. So we should get it done. Yes. Sorry, folks. It's just one at a time.
All of you are here.
Yeah,
now,
right.
Not in Harrisburg.
Correct.
Is there any possibility, indication that anyone can make it up there tonight by 11:59 in order to vote?
Look, we're all prepared to do that, but whether that will happen, I'm skeptical at this point. As I said, my understanding is there were further conversations today, but I don't think that we are at a point where a deal could be brought together in time for the end of tonight. But having said that, we are prepared, and we're prepared to go in whenever we're called to go in. Perry mentioned before the House went in on Sunday. We went in 4 o'clock on Tuesday. I'm prepared to go in anytime. That's our job, and that's what we need to do. And if a deal gets done, that's what we will do. But again, I urge the Republican leadership to focus on a real solution here and offer a real compromise. That's not what they've done so far, and that needs to happen, or we're not going to get to a deal. Okay, any other questions before we break? Oh, yes. Right. Look, so let me, if I can, for the microphones, repeat the question. The question that was posed was, how can we convince the Republicans of the importance of this, essentially? And as I said, 12 years ago, that was a bipartisan understanding. There was no question about it. $2.5 billion in new revenue and recurring revenue was secured with Act 89. The truth is, and I said this down in Philadelphia last week, this is an issue that affects the entire Commonwealth, not just southeastern Pennsylvania, not just Philadelphia, not just Bucks County. But it's also true that the southeastern part of the state is an economic engine for Pennsylvania. And right after that is Pittsburgh, and then all the other economies that go around the state. If we cripple those economies because we're not funding mass transit, and mass transit has to make these deep cuts, that's going to have an impact on us economically. And this is a state, by the way, every year we hear this statistic that the state is getting older. This might be the end of our press conference, by the way. The state's getting older, and we need to invest not just in mass transit and education, but in all kinds of things throughout the state to bring younger people here to retain people and human capital. So, all right. Well, thank you all very much. Thank you all for coming out, guys.